Welcome to the RD Squeeze. I'm Nikki.
And I'm Emily.
And we're two dietitian besties here to squeeze out the misinformation around health and nutrition. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 12, season 2 of the RD Squeeze podcast. Very excited to get into this episode.
Yes, we're going to talk about choosing your pathways to become a dietitian.
Yes.
We're going to confuse you a little bit more, but there's a lot of ways to become a dietitian, which is a good thing for those who are in, whether you're a younger student who's trying to find your way or whether you're a second career. Many ways that you can become a dietitian, but we make sure that it's an accredited program that we talked about in our last episode. So Mickey's going to kind of dive into this one. This is her realm of expertise.
Yeah.
So we're going to use it right now.
Yeah, and I think we can tie in some of our personal experiences with this one too, like looking for ours when we looked for programs. There are, I think, more options now than there were when we did ours, but as Emily said, this can be a little confusing. So keep your thinking cap on.
Get your notepads, write out the common words.
I wish I had a visual, but I don't, and I think that's something we should probably work on, like all the different pathways to become a dietitian, and it can get a little complicated. There's a lot of overlap as well, and it can get confusing, and there's a lot of acronyms. So even if, Emily, if you catch me using an acronym that our audience may not know or you don't know, please let me know, because I
probably don't know some of them too.
Yeah, I talk about this stuff all the time, so it kind of just comes second nature to me. But also, like, I don't talk about it a lot with my family and friends and stuff because I don't talk about work with them a lot. Like, I try to keep that stuff.
But our significant others know our terms.
They do. They've been learning.
They learn well. They have a test usually at the end of like the year that we've done whatever we've done.
Yeah.
What is and? What's panned?
Yeah.
What's knee panned?
Yeah. They should get like little like stickers or something that just like I've survived the acronyms this year or something. I don't know. But yeah, so there's a lot of abbreviations and things like that we can use. But yeah, so I'm gonna dive in. I do have some notes here that I might refer to just so I don't get anything confused. I also have them on my phone, so if like you're looking at them, I might look at my phone because I want this to be as accurate and as informative as possible. But again, some of it I'm even sometimes confused about. And I meet with a lot of potential incoming students that also don't understand the differences, and they don't understand the complexities of each different type of program and who they're really for. And I think what I would love to do, Emily, one day, it's not going to be anytime soon, but just have program directors maybe from each different program to talk about the difference and what their program looks like, maybe because I only deal with specific components of this and transitioning to a new one, and I don't always know the ins and outs and maybe the nuances of each one. So I'm going to give a very not a brief overview, but just an overview of what I understand everything to be. So this is for you students who are like, what am I talking about? What do you mean there's multiple pathways? I thought there was one pathway. Wrong. You can choose different ones.
It's hard to understand too, and that's why we're trying to give you the clarification here. You're not going to understand until you're in it, in a way.
Well, and to be fair, I don't know about when you were younger, but I picked nutrition and dietetics my sophomore year of college. And I didn't know I needed to take an RD exam. I didn't know there was an internship involved. I didn't know at the time, there is a master's requirement now, but at the time we did, there wasn't. So some students may not realize that there's a master's requirement. Like, there's things that when I got into dietetics, I thought I just majored in it and I was a dietitian, and that is not correct. There's other components there. So sometimes students think, oh, this sounds like a good career for me, but then they don't fulfill that, and they may just become a nutritionist, or they go the dietetic technician route, which I do have that in this, I think in this episode, that we'll cover as well, if that's an option that you want to seek out too. All right, let's get into it. So first is a coordinated program. Marywood used to have a coordinated program. I was not in that program. And sometimes I'll be pulling from my own experiences here too, so just, bear with me. A coordinated program is typically you do your bachelor's degree. You get a DPD verification statement. Emily, what does DPD stand for?
Didactic Program in Dietetics.
Perfect. And you'll get your DPD verification statement, but you also, while you're doing your bachelor's degree, can complete your requirements to sit for the RD exam. Usually that means 1,000 hours or more of supervised practice hours in a site. Marywood used to have this. They would have students, they would do their bachelor's in that second year or third year. Mm-hmm. Well, second year they would apply. Third year they would start it, and then they would finish by their senior year so they could sit for the RD exam, basically by the end of their 4 years of undergraduate. Coordinated programs are still out there. I think, though, because of the master's requirement, they kind of have to pull in the master's degree requirement somewhere, so that might have extended their programs a little bit more. So it's basically you can do your bachelor's, master's, DPD, and DI verification statement or dietetic internship verification statement, all to sit for the RD exam. So that is a coordinated program. So that is, if you know from the get-go that that's what you want to do, I would say that that's a good program option for you because you can kind of get everything out of the way in one shot. It's kind of usually fed in throughout the entire, usually university or college. There is application processes through that, but it's usually they want you to almost stay there. So they want you to kind of go through the entire program with that.
And rotation. So really like your junior year of college is almost like you would probably take a master's class or two. So that way you're only doing, I'll say the fifth year, you're not doing so much heavy coursework.
Correct. Yeah. I would think it would be split up over.
Yeah.
Because we have now a similar program. We don't have a coordinated program anymore. We have a didactic program and dietetics program right now. We have a master's program, and then we have a master's and dietetic internship program. So we'll talk about that.
So those are three separate programs.
Three separate types of programs that you can go to at Marywood. But our DPD students are usually fed into the MSDI. And there is a pre-select option for that where they can do their DPD, their DI, and their verification statement in an accelerated format within 5 years. So normally that program would take 6 years, and that's where that junior year, that senior year, we add in master's level courses, and then you're completing everything in 5 years rather than 6 years. I'm actually starting pre-select interviews tomorrow when we're recording this. And I'll be doing that. So there'll be juniors applying for that so they can complete theirs in 5 years. That is not a coordinated program. That is just those different programs with a pre-select option. So again, there might be a coordinated program that doesn't necessarily require you to apply. We do have you apply because we look for certain GPA requirements, certain characteristics of a student to be successful in accelerated programming, because somebody who is at that level may not be mature enough to complete the whole thing in 5 years. And that's okay. That's fine. Sometimes they need a lot extra time, or they need, due to personal reasons, they still want to do it, but maybe just at an accelerated format. And that's okay. I think that coordinated program, someone can yell at me if I'm wrong. It's kind of like it's understood that you would be doing it all together. Now there might be an application for that coordinated program initially, but I think that in that sense, it would all be together.
And what I was going to say is just remembering that all of these programs utilize the Ascend accreditation. So they're all meeting the same, I'm going to say in general, the same competencies, the same performance indicators, the same education requirements for you to become a dietitian.
Correct. So every single program that we're going to talk about today are accredited unless otherwise stated. They are under Ascend, which we talked about in the last episode, the Accreditation Council for Education and Nutrition Dietetics. I got it again. So Ascend accredits all these programs. Some programs, like we mentioned, they don't go through an accreditation process. So like Marywood's Masters in Nutrition, that's just a Masters in Nutrition, doesn't need to go through being accredited, because it's not a guaranteed way to sit for an RD exam. It's kind of just like if you're, I don't know,
kinesiology,
and you want
athletic training,
correct,
and you want Masters in Nutrition, you can get that.
Correct.
Going back to some of our other episodes, that doesn't make you a dietitian. That doesn't make you qualified to counsel and provide medical nutrition therapy.
Correct. That literally is just you're going through a graduate degree component, which actually is what technically I did, which I can talk about that a little bit. But so the next program that students would be looking at is the DPD, the Didactic Program in Dietetics. And that DPD program, we do have that currently at Marywood, and other programs. I mean, I'm using Marywood because that's where I work. So, take that with a grain of salt.
It's a typical university.
Yeah.
It's small, but it's a typical university of what's provided.
So your freshman year, you can say you're interested in nutrition, and you can decide if you want to just go through like the nutrition degree or like a health degree, or you want to go for the bachelor's in nutrition with the DPD verification statement. And so that DPD verification statement basically gives you entry to go into a dietetic internship, to go to a graduate program, which we'll get into, all these other programs. It gives you this statement that says, I've met the knowledge requirements. So they're KRDNs, knowledge requirements for RDNs, at the bachelor's level, which not all didactic programs are undergraduate programs. There can be some graduate ones. But my experience, I mostly see it in undergrad. Especially with the master's requirement. I think it's a lot to fit in a graduate program. So that DPD, they apply to be in that program. You have to have certain requirements, and one of that is usually a GPA requirement or something, or that DPD director. So the coworker I have will kind of screen them and say, I think you could do the accelerated program, or I don't think you could do the accelerated program. Regardless, those students, by the end of that bachelor's degree, they meet all of these certain KRDNs, put into different classes. And we have a supervised practice component that does not go towards their DI. It's kind of just like extra experience that they can put on their resumes when applying to other programs.
Yep, I had that. I had 200 hours is what I needed for that.
Yep. Same thing. I did mine through Marywood, but they kind of just set us up at different sites to get some experience working in different components, and also seeing what we liked, what we didn't like. And then they basically can take that DPD verification statement and apply to any DI program. So any dietetic internship program, they can use it and apply to a graduate program. They can do whatever with it. Our logic is in pre-select, they would get a DPD verification statement and come through us with the master's and the dietetic internship program and kind of feed into that, that pool of applicants for our program. With the DPD, again, there's certain requirements that they have to meet, but overall, it does give you options to apply to certain programs, because certain programs require a DPD verification statement and certain licensure requires a DPD verification statement, or certain classes or courses are required for licensure in certain states, and that's usually met within the DPD. And we'll talk, again, this is going to sound very complicated, but it all kind of flows into it nicely, because it almost gives you, I would say the DPD gives you a very good base knowledge of going into maybe a more specialized component. What's nice about the DPD is you could get a master's then in something completely different than nutrition. And this is where I think it is cool, because the DPD, you can complete that, you can get a master's in something completely else, and then by the end of that master's, you can go and get a DI someplace else, which is totally fine. Some programs like us, we have a master's in nutrition. For me, there's pros and cons to having them feed into us. I think it's cool that they can get another degree somewhere else and get something specialized if they have the DPD, but it's also a benefit for us to get students in terms of enrollment to have them go through us. So there's pros and cons to this from an administrative standpoint, an educator standpoint versus a student standpoint. So I'm trying not to like almost screw myself out of this, but I think it's interesting to get a DPD verification statement because I think that gives you a good base knowledge to pursue more specialization. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you do not have that, you are kind of funneled into you need to catch up on all the nutrition stuff that you need to in your graduate degree studies, which we'll talk about. So do you think that was a good explanation of DPD? Is there something?
So like for me, I did a DPD program. So I did complete undergraduate program in dietetics, got my bachelor's degree, and then I had to apply for master's programs, had to apply for the DI program, both individually. So they were separate application processes. Now, with what the future education model is, which you'll go into, that is new since I've been in school, new in the past couple of years, really. But when I did it, I could pick any master's. Yes, it did not have to be in nutrition. That was my choice to go on and do a master's degree. Really, all I needed was the DI in order to become a dietitian. But I wanted to do a master's that was more specialized. That's where I looked into then. Now, I could have used potentially the Ascend website. We talked about last episode of finding programs through that. But because this master's, I didn't need it to do the DI and to meet those requirements. I already had the didactic program, the undergraduate program. I didn't go through Ascend. I just looked at programs that specifically were sports nutrition is what I ended up getting my master's in. So I found a couple programs. I applied to those specifically. And that allowed me to specialize a little bit more. I agree. I kind of like having the choice. I love my master's. Unfortunately, I'm not doing much with it right now. A little bit, but not too much. And I wish I could go back and do of course I can go and do another master's if I want to, but I wish I would have got like public health right now. That's a really big interest to me. I love epidemiology and things like that. So would I have preferred to gone and done that? I think I could do a lot more with it, even though it's still specialized. It's in something different. It's not just nutrition, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I've just heard the nutrition programs, and I'm not bad talking any type of program. If you're going for just that more advanced level nutrition program, I didn't get a lot of benefit out of that because I still had to take some of those types of programs through my master's. I didn't see much benefit. Yes, it was a little more advanced, but doing a whole new 2 years through that, I'm not sure what benefit that had for me personally.
I would agree with you. Again, times have changed. It was a different time when you and I applied.
Yes.
It was very competitive. Yes. You kind of took what you got. You get what you get, and you don't get upset. Like you applied to these different DIs. There was no graduate program model, future education model. That wasn't a thing in our time. Not that it was like 85 years ago, but but it was about 10 years ago. And you only had DIs really to apply to. So you had to get a DPD, which that's a requirement for most I think all dietech internships. You have to have a DPD verification statement. So you do that. And then for me, I wasn't eligible to apply for the coordinated program at Marywood because I declared my major a year later. So I didn't have all of the prereqs, and they were like, well, you're really going to have to overload yourself in that. And I was like, screw it. I'm just not going to apply. I'll just either apply to different DIs. I won't do it in like an accelerated level. Which I'm glad it worked out the way it did in some ways. Some ways I'm not, but I applied to internships after I graduated my bachelor's. I got matched to Cedar Crest College in Allentown, which that whole match process was different at the time. We applied through a match process, which we don't do that anymore. Which I think that's next episode that we're going to record. I can't remember. I think so. But you applied, you picked different ones. You have to pay fees for that. You need all these different application resources. And then you basically go through a matching process where yes, it is an episode, but you rank your programs and you get matched to them.
Yeah.
And I can talk about this more, but regardless, I was matched to this program. And so I did my DI, and then I applied for my master's. Well, I was already accepted to Marywood's master's, and I just got it in nutrition because I didn't really feel like applying anywhere else. Right. And I was already accepted, and I just was like, I'll just do it. Mm-hmm. I wish I got my master's in something else, like public health or something, because that is where I have interest. Mm-hmm. But I did it because it was convenient, and I wanted to be done with school. At that point, I was tired, and I just wanted to work. And so it took me 4, 5, 7 years to do all of that. Because and
I was 6, so if you had gone 1 extra year with the master's,
yeah, my master's was a 2-year program, but I had done my internship separate from my master's, where at the time Cedar Crest didn't offer like a combined. Now they do, but at the time they didn't, so I just did everything separate.
Right. So I did my master's while I was doing my internship program. They were technically separate, but many were also in the program.
But I was a dietitian while I did my master's. Yeah. So I could have been working as a dietitian, which is not an option really right now anymore. You have to have a master's before you even sit for the RD exam, which again, that changed last year, which is another episode that's coming up, why we talk about that. But I was able to work if I wanted to. I didn't. I was working in restaurants and as a GA.
Yeah, and that was the same as I was the GA for nutrition.
Yeah, I was the GA for student activities at the time. So like I was working, just not in the field, because again, with all of that, I just had a lot on my plate and I really couldn't apply for jobs. So I just kind of was like, and that's the other thing. This area was super competitive with dietitians. There was like no jobs around now.
There were none. I remember my first 2 years, I couldn't find a job.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing with me. I would like keep an eye out, and everybody knows I'm not a clinical person at heart. But I would apply to them. I wouldn't hear back because, there's so many people that were trying to get jobs around here. And I think it was because of Marywood, a lot of people were kind of anchored to this area then because of the program. But anyway, so that's kind of what happened for me. And I think that just is a little bit different nowadays. But circling back to dietetic internships. So there's a variety of different DIs out there, and they do not have to be through universities or colleges. They can be through food service companies. They can be through hospitals. I think we talked about this a little bit. Sodexo, Aramark, Geisinger used to have one. The Department of Veterans Affairs, like WIC, the Department of Health, all of these different things can all have dietetic internships. And a lot of them will partner now with colleges or universities for a degree. So they can get that master's and the DI at the same time. Marywood does both of that in one shot. So we have the master's component. Anybody can come to Marywood and get a master's in nutrition or master's in sports and human performance nutrition if they want it. But if you want to do your DI at the same time, you can do both in a 2-year program. So if at the time we were doing matches, we would get matches from out of state because we have an on-site and a distance program. And that's the other thing. There's on-site and distance programs for DIs and other programs, as we will mention, the graduate programs.
And that might be where more of those food service companies come in for the distance. They're looking for who can I partner with.
Correct.
To do that.
Correct. So some of them might, have a lot of facilities in one area. So they might partner with the university in that area so they can get a lot of dietitians in that area. For Marywood, we basically have you do all graduate coursework in the first year. And then the second year you finish your graduate coursework and then you do your internship.
I'm so glad I did mine when I did it because I would not like doing that way. I did my internship my first year with the program.
Really?
Yes, because my second year, your master's, I did a thesis. So I'm doing my research. I'm going in and doing data analysis. I don't want to do that while I'm working 32 hours a week.
Yeah. Well, and I think at the time too, your year, I think you didn't have capstone. I think my year was the first year was capstone. So I was able to do a capstone, and that's where other students were able to do a capstone while they were doing their DI. A lot of students, especially distance students, like that for us. And again, there's other programs. I'm just using Marywood as an example, but a lot of programs will have you do your internship first. We didn't do that because that first year graduate coursework doesn't require distance students to have their sites identified, which is a big pressure for distance students. Like,
it is.
A lot of programs are like, you need to have your sites identified before you even apply to us.
Correct. Yep.
I think that's loosening up a little bit because of the application decline. But prior to that, that was a big stressor for students, especially to apply, because preceptors are low, sites are low. A lot of sites are contracted with certain universities, so that's a problem. For example, if someone's in Sodexo in a hospital, they'll only take Sodexo students.
Right. Yep.
Or they'll only take this university students because it's a local university. That's a problem. And I can go on that for a very long time of how that is a problem, because I have students that will work with me, but they can't find a site in their area, even though they want to do our program.
Yeah.
And it inhibits them from getting into other sites. And honestly, sometimes, I'm not bashing any other programs, but sometimes our students are better quality and sometimes they're not great quality, like depending on where they're going. But usually it's almost like a give or take. But anyway, so that DI, it's usually, I find it very hard to do a DI in less than 12 months. Some programs can do that. I don't know how, because there's a lot of competencies you have to meet in a DI. And there's that 1,000 hours. I don't know how people are doing more than 1,000 hours. Well, it used to be 1,200 hours too when we did it.
Yeah.
That changed in the pandemic. They reduced it to 1,000 because
students not being able to get there if they needed time off due to the pandemic issues.
And also they needed dietitians. They needed more students coming out, and that was inhibiting students from graduating on time because they couldn't get into sites. And then there was also this virtual component where they can do things virtually. That has decreased a little bit. They can only do so many hours virtual, which a lot of preceptors are like, I'll take a student, but they can only work with them virtually. And like, unfortunately, that's not supervised practice hours, because you're not physically working with them. I understand, we're moving in that direction, but they need that physical.
You need to be on site doing patient care, not working virtually. And again, yes, there is a difference between certain counseling methods and seeing patients over a virtual call versus if you're inpatient or in different types of settings. You need to be physically seeing the patients, doing a physical assessment. You have to be on site, and you get that more personalized communication with your preceptor then too.
Correct. So with the DI, again, you can complete that usually in about a year or less. And again, that's also depending on how many hours you go to a site. So if you're doing a full-time 8-hour day, 5 days a week, that's 40 hours a week that can be done. If you are looking for something more part-time, you're going to want to look for something in that program that says there's a part-time option, especially if you have to work, if you have a family, if you're, whatever the case may be. I have a lot of students that are having children, have spouses, have their spouses are in the military, so they have to move. They have to go where they're on base. There's a lot of different components there. So that also affects your ability to do part-time or full-time. We usually do about 4 days a week. 8 hours a day, and that's about 32 hours a week. So that gives them a little extra time.
And you just saying some of that too, I think a lot of that has changed with the inclusivity, diversity of the student population that we have, because students, you might be thinking younger, but no, we have second career, we have older adults that are coming into our profession who have families, who are caretakers, and they need that flexibility. And I know when I was in it, it was like, no, you have to be there 8 hours a day, and you take your lunch, and this is when what your preceptor tells you to do is what you do. I appreciated that. But I think, yes, having that flexibility of, hey, can I actually come in on a weekend day because I can't, an emergency came up, or like, I just know I have to take my mother here or whatever. That's appropriate in today's world.
Yeah, I think especially with the pandemic, we've incorporated a lot more flexibility, especially with sick time.
That's good.
I agree. And when I did my internship, there was like, you don't get sick time, you don't get weather days, like nothing like that. You go because you have to be there. I actually this is a whole nother sidetrack, but I got in a car accident because I felt so pressured to be, and I drove through bad weather. And that is something I think when I experienced that, and again, it wasn't a bad scenario. It was more so my own self. I wanted to be on site, and I messed up and I slid and, ruined my car. But, I didn't want students to feel that pressure. If you don't feel safe driving, and I think preceptors are very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, I know in healthcare, like if you have to be there, you have to be there. But I never wanted students to be in that extra stress, because then I had to pay, I think, $3,000 to get my car fixed. I didn't have that money. So I charged it, and here we are, like I had debt and all this other stuff. I didn't want students to feel like that. So I was like, this is something that preceptors have to be okay with, having a little bit of flexibility, and being able to adjust. And I said, and working through spring break then, or working through fall break or something, just being able to adjust if something does come up. So I think that has been helpful moving forward. I think with that said, with the DIs, you mentioned second careers. This is where people got discouraged, and I think there was a decline in applications, because so many students wanted to become dietitians later on, and they already had a bachelor's, and they were like, oh, you have to have a full DPD verification statement before you even go to a DI. And that's a whole nother bachelor's degree, right? So we can accelerate that as best we can, and I think that's where some of those coordinated programs come in and things like that. However, it was adding this extra cost. It was adding this extra time. It was almost having like 8-10 years onto a student to be able to completely finish and become an RD. That was a huge barrier for a lot of students. And I think that's where we were seeing a lot of them go just like the nutrition route, or they would pursue something else, and, we would lose them. So that is where the future education model, graduate program model comes in. I think I'll go to that one first, and then I'll circle back to the other ones, because I think the other stuff, again, I hope you're bearing with us. So it's a lot, and I think a lot of students don't understand this, and I'm hoping this is helpful. Again, I wish I had a visual, but I don't, but hopefully this is helpful. So the future education model, this is what we are applying to do because of the reason I just said. We were getting so many students who wanted to become dietitians, but had a bachelor's in kinesiology, athletic training, marketing, English. They just want something different. And then when you tell them that they have to go for a whole nother bachelor's, they're like, okay, goodbye. Like, I'm going someplace else. So for us, it was an enrollment strategy. This graduate program is very similar kind of to what we're doing now. It's combining a graduate degree with the DI competencies, or the competencies, but there's really no hour requirement. You have to do at least 1,000 hours, and that is for licensure purposes. Most licensure requires at least 1,000 hours. So you have to meet that criteria, and I think that's just like a general rule. Like, you need to do some supervised practice, but it provides flexibility because those hours can be completed really at any point during the program. They don't have to be necessarily like right, and it can be met. And those competencies and those performance indicators that are also involved, which those are not involved in any other programs. They're like little more niche, like specific competencies, and you're being assessed at multiple different levels. And now, again, we're not doing this program right now. We're applying to do it, but I've done my research. There's pros and cons to all programs, but this is it's almost evaluating them at all different levels at knows, shows, and does. So you're progressing throughout rather than just saying, oh, you met this competency? Check. Oh, you met this competency? Check. It's more so, okay, tell me how you know this.
Yeah.
Show me how you know this. Okay, now go do it. And I think that is beneficial because it's assessing at multiple different levels, and students can work at different paces with that. Like, some students can really accelerate with that, and then other students might need a little extra time. But regardless, there isn't 1,000-hour supervised practice component, but those competencies and things can be met throughout the entire coursework. The con here is the grad degree, and if you're doing any competencies in that grad degree, you can't omit any of those courses unless they're elective courses, and most elective courses, you won't put any of those competencies in there because students can take whatever, and it's not like streamlined, or what's the word? The same across the board.
Okay.
So students who are taking like a research class or like the thesis or the capstone, those are all required courses. So we're putting competencies in those, but you can't like omit those.
Okay.
There's also like a health promotion class. We can't omit that class because there's competencies in there. So some students who have previously maybe had a master's degree or prior work experience or something, they can't eliminate that anymore. Where we used to be able to be like, oh, you can test out of that. You can transfer that credit. You can't do that now.
Okay.
So that's kind of a con because there are some students who are like, oh, I have this. Do I need to take it? And it's like, yeah, you still need to take it because I can reduce your hours, but I can't reduce the classwork. And that goes to for like assessment of prior learning. So a lot of times programs will either assess or not assess prior work experience. So those second career dietitians who are maybe worked as a food service director for years and decided they wanted to become a dietitian, yeah, we'll assess your work experience. That can reduce your hours and what you need to do for the food systems. It doesn't take off the class though. You still have to take the class and you still have to do the components for the class to show that you met those competencies. Now, if you show me in the assessment of prior learning that you've met those competencies and you can show me all of that with proof, we can maybe again reduce the hours, but it's not going to take off the coursework. There's also prerequisites usually for these programs. Because you don't have that DPD verification statement, we need to make sure that you have some sort of base knowledge before coming into that program. Usually it's science courses, so like organic chemistry, biochem, anatomy, and physiology. And then it kind of depends. Some programs want an M&T course. Some programs want basic nutrition. We almost, from our standpoint, we actually put statistics in there because so many undergrad degrees require like a statistics research course. We thought that might be a little more accessible. And we incorporated 2 M&T classes in our curriculum, our new updated curriculum. So if you're a DPD student that's applying for this, right, a completely different DPD program, you're like, well, I took M&T 1 and 2 already, so why would I need to take this? It depends on if you want a refresher. Maybe we're not the best fit for you. Now, for our program that was prior to the DPD, they were phasing out the DPD, we're phasing out the MSDI. We're just basically feeding people into this graduate program. So that M&T is actually in their graduate level, that first year where they're just doing graduate coursework. So we're keeping that structure. Again, I hope this is making sense, but they can feed into that. And that's how that's kind of working out and playing.
Okay.
Prerequisites can depend on whatever school you're applying to. So that is individualized and they get to choose that. Those are just the 4 that we picked. So, but regardless, that's kind of where it's at. Now, I don't have any data on that or anything like right now. But most programs are assessed on their pass rate, their enrollment, things like that. So that's kind of where that's at. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's kind of the differences there. There is individualized supervised practice pathways or ISPs.
Okay.
And these I am not super familiar with. Marywood used to offer them. They don't anymore. That was with the coordinated program. So I'm going to refer to my notes here. This says it's ideal for people who have a doctoral degree. So there are doctoral standards that are going to come out in 2027 along with new accreditation standards in 2027. So we will do an episode on that when they come out.
First floor. I have to go get my doctorate.
No. No, I don't think it's going to be a requirement for RDs, but like if someone has it or they want to pursue it, there's actually going to be programs out there that can work through this. But I guess this is how you would do it if you have an ISP. So your ISPs, you would have a DPD, you would have completed a DPD program or hold a doctoral degree, and you'd have to complete ISPs. Now, if you have a doctoral degree, you should have a master's degree, unless you just went right for your doctorate. But I don't know how.
No, you have to have your master's.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And it's probably, I think those ones are more in a health-related field with a certain requirement of undergrad / master's classes that meet standards for having a background in, like you said, biochem and chemistry.
I think this too is a little more flexible. I don't think it's as structured as a DI. Like, I think it's more so this person figures it out on their own, essentially.
It's almost like a distance program with the programs that kind of allow that flexibility for the competencies of, like, get it done when you can in this time frame.
Agreed. So if that sounds like that's something that you need to look into, I think, I'm only giving you a light overview of that, but I think that is still a flexible route for a lot of people. That may, like I said, be second, third career people, or like I said, they've had public health knowledge or whatever. That might be some, or research knowledge, like a lot of research. That might be something that they want to look into. And lastly, we get a lot of international students that want to become dietitians in the US, and they might either already be dietitians in their country where they're from, or they might have completed a lot of the components to be a dietitian in their country, but then they, want to pursue dietetics in the United States. I guess we have a little more clout sometimes, or whatever the case may be, or, they're immigrating, whatever. So those are options available to those students. If you already have your RD, I think you just have to get everything evaluated by Ascend or an evaluating agency on the Ascend website. That is a link I send out a lot to students. Or if you're trying to pursue dietetics and pursue a dietetic internship or a graduate program model, you'll usually have to have your bachelor's degree evaluated or your master's degree evaluated. See what classes you're missing, see if you've met all the competencies. You might have to do some sort of portfolio to show that you've met all those, or provide your syllabi, things like that. And that gets evaluated through one of those agencies and individually by the program. So for example, our DPD director and myself will look at an international student's either transcripts and that degree evaluation, and then they might say, oh, they have a bachelor's in nutrition in the United States. Cool. That doesn't mean they have a DPD verification statement. So we have to go and see how they met all of the KRDNs. And that's where our DPD director comes into play. She'll evaluate that and say, yes, you have, or like, you maybe didn't have an M&T class, so you might have to take that before you pursue a DI or a graduate program. This actually works out because if you don't want to do a DI, those international students can automatically just go into a graduate program model, because those typically don't require a DPD verification statement. Some do. Some will want a DPD. I will not. I know other schools do require it.
Even with your future education model?
Correct. That's a choice on them. And that's, again, it's not required. You don't have to, but if that's what they want, then that's what they want.
I think that gives that flexibility of, what, these are hard, things to figure out. Did you not? It appears per your resume of your education that you've met those competencies. Yes, okay, we'll take that. I think that it broadens the ability to accept students.
I agree. I think so too. I personally think, if a student is really interested, we can figure out a way to have them meet everything else before having them go through a DPD. But that's just me.
So how about if they already have the RDN credential? So let's say, like Canada, they're so close. What for them do they have to do to be able then to say, I'm a dietitian in the US now?
So they have to get their all of their documentation evaluated by one of those agencies on the accreditation website. I've gone through this with a couple students. Some are dietitians, some are not. But they still have to go through those agencies, and they basically say, like, this is what's awarded. And then sometimes you'll have to go to a program and say, can you evaluate my degree and see if I've met all of them to be able to award me a dietetic, like a DI verification statement, essentially. I don't know what it's called for graduate program. I think it's still like a DI verification statement, but I don't know. Just some sort of verification. Yeah. So that way they have taken the exam or whatever. Or if they're already a dietitian, it just gets evaluated. And if there's anything missing, they just have to fill in those gaps. But a lot of times, program people won't even look at it until you have that evaluation completed. because if you don't, like, you could say, oh yeah, I have my bachelor's in nutrition, but if it didn't equate a bachelor's in nutrition to whatever that agency says, I can't take you. Like, I can't take you with, to show you that you met the DPD. Now, if it's just for any bachelor's, I can take you in the graduate program. Mm-hmm. So like right now I couldn't take certain students because they didn't have that. And I was like, you might as well just wait for the graduate program kind of. But, some students, I'm thinking for like dietitians, I think they just go through Ascend and those agencies. And then I did have somebody say that they did have their RD in another country and they needed somebody else to get it evaluated and they still had to take the exam here. So that I found was interesting because when you do that, that person still gets put on my pass rate. So I have not had the ability to prepare them or anything, but if I award them a DI verification or whatever verification statement, they're still on my pass rate. Okay. And that I think is where it gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what that looks like, and I'd have to do a little more research on that, I think, but maybe I can follow up with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe we can find somebody to come in and talk about that process one day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
It's a lot of info. So can you just summarize, I think, the two biggest programs that you kind of talked about, the first couple?
Sure. I think the two biggest things is you'll see is a DPD DI and now this future grad program. It's not as big, but it's definitely on the up and coming. Those are the ones that you're going to see the most of. There's a lot of back and forth about those. I think individually, if you have programs that you're interested in, talk to the program directors. They're going to give you the most information and the most accurate information to see if they're a good fit. I'll be very honest right now, and I think we've talked about this. It's a student market right now. So programs are looking to enroll students. Yeah. We are not fighting for applicants, but we really are trying to get students to come to us. So they're going to want to talk to you and kind of, I always say, I want to find the best program for you though. Like, I don't want to push you into mine if I don't think it's going to be a good fit for you and what you need. But I'm still always willing to talk to students about their concerns or anything like that. But the biggest thing is DPD, DI. You need a DPD verification statement in your bachelor's usually. And then you do a DI and a master's degree component. You always need that master's degree component now. Yeah. The graduate program, you can get a bachelor's in anything. It doesn't require a DPD verification statement. You can apply to those programs and you can basically get a base knowledge, get your graduate degree, and do your DI in that future graduate program. Okay. I think if you already have a master's program, you're probably actually going to want to look for a standalone DI.
Probably. Yeah.
That's my thought. I don't think people want to get another degree unless you want a degree. Yeah. A lot of places also do have specialization or paths that they can get specific degrees. So Marywood is applying to have 2 degree options and eventually more, but other programs have a variety. So you can get a master's in public health or a master's in business or whatever, and you can still get everything you need to become a dietitian. It's just a little more specialized. So those programs that exist, I can't name them off the top of my head right now, but you can look into them and find out. But I think that summarizes that. Yeah,
I think a lot of good information for students, interns, and anyone looking to go into our field, or just those who are like, what is a dietitian? How do they have to get their credentials? And are they really accredited?
Yeah. I mean, most of the time, that program directory that we talked about, that can definitely show you where to find specific programs. There's always program fairs. Even if you're a student and you go to FNCE every year, the Food and Nutrition Conference and Expo every year, there's usually a supervised practice fair. So there's always programs there that you can look at. I always say, do your due diligence, do a lot of research, because there's a lot of like littler programs out there that are amazing. Not to toot my own horn here, but like we're a smaller program in terms of like clout. Like we're not a lot of people hear about Marywood, but it is a really good program. I think a lot of students get very focused on, the bigger names, and that always doesn't mean anything. Because I mean, we have a lot of Marywood graduates out there that are alumni, and they'll take our students, pretty regularly if we find them as preceptors. So, just because you haven't heard of them doesn't mean, they don't have some clout, because we've had programs since 1991, accredited programs, and then we've had like a nutrition degree since 1915. So we've been around a while. And there's other programs that are just popping out, and they don't have that reputation, I guess, out there yet. They don't have that developing rapport with a lot of places. So just to consider that, or just like I said, find programs that really meet your interests. And I think that's the best bet, and just talk to your program directors. But yeah.
Well, thanks so much for all that info, Mickey.
I know, that was a big one.
That's okay. That's all right. Now we're going to get to NDTRs.
Yeah. So again, this is not something I'm super well versed in, but I did want to mention it because not everybody wants to become a dietitian, and that's okay. And there's plenty of need out there for dietetic technician registered. So these are people that often work with dietitians, and they usually have a bachelor's in nutrition. This could include an associate or a bachelor's degree with nutrition or food science. And then they could have completed a DPD verification statement, but just not have went on to become an RDN. So they didn't do an internship. And some students do that. I mean, I know a very awesome NDTR who works for Campbell's, and maybe we'll have her on one day too, because she's great. But she got a DPD, but decided not to become a dietitian, and that's totally fine. But basically there is a credentialing exam for this. So you can still complete the education requirements for that, which is usually a bachelor's. And then there's like a supervised practice component. I think it's like 400 hours or so, which is why the DPD verification statement usually is involved in that, because there usually is that supervised practice component in there. And then they take an exam similar to the RD exam. I think it's a little bit shorter. And there's not, again, so many practical applications because there's not as much MNT, because DTRs technically couldn't practice MNT without the supervision of a dietitian. And most notes and things like that, is like the easier, not the easier, I don't want to say that. I think the less complex cases, I think usually are done by DTRs, and then the more complex medical nutrition therapy stuff goes to registered dietitians. Not all states utilize dietetic technician registered either. Like Pennsylvania, I rarely see DTRs being utilized, but in like New York and other states, I think they are used more. So that is an option if you decide like maybe you have that background, but maybe you just don't want to be an RDN. I think they are mostly in clinical as well, for the most part, if that's the degree. But like I said, we know somebody who went the completely different route and has a great job. So that's kind of summarizing all of that. I think overall, the big thing is there's always going to be that base knowledge that's going to be there. There's always going to be an 1,000-hour degree requirement, or hour requirement, I'm sorry, for any of these programs. And there's always going to be an exam. It doesn't matter what exam you're taking, there's going to be an exam. So if you want that credential, that's going to have to happen. And then again, the licensure component, also if you're practicing in a specific area, most, I think, programs need to have a licensure page if they meet licensure. Like Marywood has one that says if we meet licensure in this specific state so far. Now licensure changes, could change at any point, but they do have to have that. So just look at that too if you're interested. But so that's that.
All right. Well, great info. Thank you. We're going to get into our sweet and sours, I think, to end the episode up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Why don't you go with do we want to do sour first?
Yeah, let's do our sours first. I guess my sour right now is just, I don't know. Right now it's all these pathways are very confusing. So I'm just going to go with that. It can be very confusing. It can be very stressful. It can be, intimidating for a lot of people, especially like when I just threw out so much information. So that's what I'm kind of sour about. I wish it was a little more streamlined, or a little bit more, I wish I didn't have to like do this episode, right? Like I wish it was just easier to know these things, but a lot of students have a lot of confusion, especially ones that I'm trying to admit to the programs. Like I'm like, we're probably not a good program fit for you. Like I'm very honest about that. I'm like, I'd hate to see you do a whole other bachelor's or something. So I think that's what I'm sour on right in this moment.
Okay.
What about you?
I'm sour on something kind of like generalized is just like clothing sizes for women. Like pant sizes, no matter what brand you get, they're all different. You can't just go and buy a 32-inch waist and it be the same. They might be stretchy, they might be for curvy, and like that's great. We have different body sizes, but you're never going to buy like probably the same size pant. I think once in my life could I buy the same size pant in different stores, and that was it for maybe a year or two, and that was the only time I could do that. But even just like clothing, like the shirts for like women specifically, I'm pointing out, because if you buy a woman's shirt, they're fitted, okay? But not every woman is the same fit. Some have larger breasts, some have smaller, some have smaller waists, some have larger waists. Your rib cages are larger. Like there's no still one size for a woman, even if you try and do different sizes.
Yeah, you really have to go by measurements, and like
it's measurements, and like even bras and underwear, different no matter what brand you buy. So that's my sours. Like, why can't we just figure it out? And I know men, maybe they don't have the curves and the bodies and the changes that women typically have, but it's so much easier for them. Why can't we go off of, like you said, maybe just other measurements? Maybe like, I don't know, we word it things that aren't numbers and sizes so women actually feel comfortable and confident in what they're wearing.
No, I agree.
That's my sour.
I love that sour. I think that's a really good point. And I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I go to Old Navy a lot for my clothes, and like I will get 3 different pairs of jeans from Old Navy, and they'll all be 3 different sizes. Like it's not even across stores, it's across like styles, and it's just it can be very frustrating. So
very that's why I'm gonna be honest, I buy stretchy stuff anymore, because like there's no size to this. Like it can change with how my body is feeling that day, and bodies change every single day, and whether you're bloated, whether you have more fluid in you, like it's gonna change. So you're not always gonna be the same size no matter what.
Great point. Great sour. I love that.
Thanks.
Sweets?
Okay, my sweet. You want me to go first?
Sure, you go first.
I did sour last. My sweet is that I just got a new refrigerator. So yeah, now I have 2 because we kept the old one. So that's like our, extra food, snacks, beverage refrigerator now.
Ooh, nice.
I've worked hard for a while. I know not the longest time compared to maybe some other dietitians, of course, but I worked hard, and so I used some of my money to buy things that I like, and I love kitchen stuff. So, the house I moved into had some older things in it, and I said, you know what? Okay, end of the year gift for me is a new refrigerator.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, that's fairly. I mean, when I was a kid, I was like, anybody who has like a second refrigerator, like really made it in the world. So you've made it as a dietitian, like having that second fridge. Well, I think that's also like the quintessential like hosting house then, because you have the room to store all of the food.
Yeah, like now I can actually put like frozen pizzas and all the other extra frozen stuff my husband likes to buy.
Sorry.
I can put all that in there. I can put the beverages that we have for our parties when we're hosting things. Like I can put those in there if I'm getting bigger items for parties, or like I host Thanksgiving. So thank you. Now I have an extra refrigerator and don't have to worry about, is it going to be cold enough that I can keep it in my extra sunroom and hope that it's warm enough?
Yeah.
Or cool enough, I should say. But don't worry, I did not do that. We are food safe, serve safe certified. We know not. We
know not to do that, but still, I get what you mean. Yeah. Oh, 100%. Awesome. Oh, I love that. Sweet? So my sweet is, right now, I finally have started performing with my improv group. We're doing pretty regular shows now. If you're local, at the AFA Gallery in Scranton. We did one this past Friday, and it went really well. And I think we're gonna. When we're recording this, we're not having one this next week, but then the following week. But it's just gonna be like a really cool regular thing.
Nice.
And I don't have to do every single one, but it's like it's nice that it'll be like a regular occurrence. Right. And I don't know, it's just been really fun to do it, and that's my sweet. I'm just happy that we're doing that. So, and
it's like a break from everything else. Like it helps your brain just kind of like, bleh.
Yeah, it's like the creative. It's the creative like outlet that like isn't nutrition related. Now, sometimes nutrition pops in from time to time, honestly, and that's okay. But it's just like my fun outlet that I do enjoy, and it is stuff that I don't really like. We do host. Well, we practice and like we do rehearse things, and it is all improvised off the bat, but like we do have to like, it's like any type of workout. You have to flex your muscle, but regardless, it is my creative outlet that I don't really have to prepare for. So I love it. Yeah.
Great. Well, good for you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so we'll go ahead and end this episode today on talking about all these different programs here.
Yeah, all the pathways.
Yeah, so we will see you on the next episode of the RD Squeeze.
Bye.
Be sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. We will always take topics you want to hear about, so message us for any topics you want to see covered on the RD Squeeze. Don't forget, it's dietitian with a T. We'll see you next time on the RD Squeeze.